My name is Claire Ashworth. I am 33 years old, and right now, a federal judge is standing at the end of my mother's dining table with a wine glass in his hand, in the middle of a toast that was supposed to be about my brother's engagement, and it has somehow become the most honest cross-examination my family has ever been forced to sit through. He stopped walking 2 seconds ago. He is standing directly in front of my chair. Every conversation at that table has gone silent at the same moment. The way sound stops when something in the room shifts from ordinary to significant. A minute ago, he was talking about character, about trust, about what it means to really know the people you are agreeing to build a life with. My mother was glowing. My brother was smiling the way he does when he thinks something is going well. His fiancée was watching him with that expression people have before they understand that the version of someone they love might not be the complete one. Then the judge looked down at me. He said, in the precise, unhurried voice of someone who has spent decades letting silence do the heavy lifting, "I have to say, I am surprised to find you here." His eyes did not move from mine. Then he asked the question that cracked my family story clean down the middle. "Who are you to them, exactly?" The table went still. Forks paused. Even the room seemed to hold something back. My mother let out a short laugh, the kind she produces when she needs to redirect quickly, and started to say something smooth about me being her daughter, her quiet daughter, the one who does administrative work for a small firm up in the city, but the judge did not look at her. He stayed watching me. The way he had watched witnesses in courtrooms. Steady. Patient. Already knowing something, and simply offering the person in front of him the opportunity to confirm it themselves. And standing there under that gaze, my mind flashed back to the phone call at 1:30 in the morning 2 nights before. My father's voice, low and careful, like he was reading from a script he had not written. My mother's voice sharp in the background, her father is a federal judge. "Do not embarrass us the way you always manage to," I had said fine. I had thought I could fold myself small for one more family evening. That I could sit at the corner of the table my mother had assigned me and let the night pass without costing anyone anything. Now the very man they had been most anxious to impress was waiting for my answer, and I understood that whatever I said next would either hold their house of managed stories together, or let the truth do what it had been trying to do for years. To understand how I became the daughter my own parents were afraid to introduce honestly, you have to understand what I started calling the mantle test when I was 7 years old. Our living room in Clearfield, Indiana had a fireplace. Above it, a wide wooden shelf. 6 framed photographs, 5 of them were my younger brother, Daniel, at various ages. Little League. A church Christmas production. A birthday with cake frosting on his chin. A school formal. A team photo from some tournament. One photograph was of me. A stiff school picture taken in 4th grade, when my front teeth were too large for my face and I was not yet old enough to know what to do about that. My photograph was wedged behind a ceramic figurine and a trailing fake ivy plant. You had to lean to one side and tilt your head to find my eyes. One afternoon when I was 7, I dragged a chair to the fireplace and moved my photograph out from behind the leaves. I put it directly in the center of the shelf, between 2 of my brothers. Then I climbed down and went back to reading my book. The next day, I came home from school and checked the mantel. My photograph was back behind the ivy. I did not move it again. But I never forgot the lesson. Love in that house was not distributed. It was allocated. My brother received the unqualified kind, the kind that did not require performance or proof or perfect grades. Mine was conditional. A reward system I had never been given the full terms of. What I did after that was spend the next 2 decades trying to win an argument that was never actually open to debate. When my brother made a school sports team, I told myself that straight A's might move my photograph. When he scored at a game, I told myself that becoming valedictorian might finally put me in the center of the frame. I graduated 2nd in my class. My mother missed the ceremony to sit in the bleachers watching my brother warm the bench for a regional playoff. She called that evening and told me the team had almost put him in. Like that was the more significant event of the day. I drove 3 hours to Northwestern University in a car that ran on the edge of acceptable, with my father's goodbye hug still stiff on my shoulders and my mother's last words in my ear: "Don't go getting ideas above your raising." At Northwestern, I found the thing I had been moving toward without a name for it. Investigative journalism. The particular satisfaction of following something through until it opened, until the thing that powerful people hoped would stay buried came to the surface and could not be ignored. I stayed in the campus newsroom until 2 and 3 in the morning chasing stories that did not seem important until they were. After graduation, I worked my way into a position at a Chicago paper, the kind of entry-level work that involved carrying coffee and double-checking other people's facts until someone finally gave me a story of my own. My first piece on my own was about a landlord who had been collecting rent while children lived in units with mold in the walls. That story led to inspections and legal consequences, and a quiet word from my editor: "You did well." I called my mother that same evening, wanting to share it. She cut me off before I had finished the first sentence, and told me how many points my brother had scored in his recreational league game that night. I kept trying. Every promotion. Every award. Every story that ran above the fold. I kept running the mantle test with the evidence of my own life, believing that eventually the weight of it would be enough. Instead, my mother told the neighbors I had dropped out of school. That I was working a small office job to stay afloat. She kept the description vague enough to reshape as needed. I found out because at one Thanksgiving, a woman from across the street asked my mother if I was doing better, referring, apparently, to a depression I had never been diagnosed with, because my mother had described my independence as an illness she was quietly managing. I stood at the kitchen sink scrubbing a clean pot for 3 full minutes so I would not walk in and say what I was thinking. I drove back anyway. I called every Sunday anyway. I sent birthday cards with small handwritten notes my mother never acknowledged. I was still the 7-year-old moving the photograph, still waiting for the morning I would come home and find my own face front and center. That was the version of me my mother had built her story around. The difficult one, the private one, the one who needed to be kept to the side so the frame could hold the image she preferred, and that was the version she planned to present at my brother's engagement dinner, with a federal judge at the table. The phone lit up my nightstand at 1:30 on a Wednesday morning. My first thought was that something had happened. Nobody calls at that hour unless the news is urgent and bad. I saw my father's name on the screen and answered before I was fully awake. His voice came through measured and careful, like he was reading instructions he had rehearsed but was not entirely comfortable with. He told me that Daniel and his fiancée were hosting a dinner that Friday with her parents. He said my mother had decided I could come, could. Not that they wanted me there. Not that it would mean something to have me present for an important night in my brother's life. Could come. I exhaled and told him I could make the drive after work. Then my mother's voice cut in from the background, sharp and direct: "Her father is a federal judge. This is an important evening for Daniel. I need you to understand what that means." I asked what she needed me to understand. She said I should not talk about my work. I should not mention what I actually did for a living. I should tell anyone who asked that I worked in an office downtown, nothing specific, nothing that could lead to follow-up questions. I should let the evening be about my brother. I lay in the dark and chose my words carefully. I told her my work was not a scandal. It was a career. It was what I had spent my adult life building. She made the sound she has always made when she finds my reasoning inconvenient, a short exhale that means you are making this complicated, and said that nobody at that table wanted to hear about crime stories from the city. That the judge and his wife were important people. That I always had a way of making things about myself. I almost told her, I almost said, "The judge whose case I spent 8 months covering is the same man you're worried about impressing." He stopped me in a courthouse hallway to tell me my journalism was some of the best he had seen. "You are asking me to tell him I do administrative filing." Instead, I said fine. The way I had been saying fine for 26 years whenever her version of the story required something from me that cost more than she acknowledged. My father let out a long, relieved breath. Like I had agreed to defuse something rather than simply attend a dinner. When the line went dead, I rolled onto my back and looked at the hairline crack in my bedroom ceiling that I had been meaning to report to my landlord for 3 months. The mantle test had followed me all the way to Chicago. I was still failing it. I arrived an hour before anyone else was expected. My mother opened the door before I reached it. Hair set, makeup on, eyes already doing the assessment they always did, reading me from head to foot to determine whether I matched the version she planned to present. "You are early," she said. No greeting. No warmth. Just that. She walked me through the house describing where everyone would sit, who would be placed where, what would be served and when. My seat was at the far end of a long table, marked with a small place card, positioned in the corner where the table narrowed and the light was softer and anyone sitting there would have to lean forward to participate in conversation. I asked if she was genuinely going to introduce me as someone who did office work. She straightened a napkin that did not need straightening and told me no one cared what I did. That Daniel was building a family and I should not make his evening complicated. My father was in his recliner with a newspaper, which was how he participated in difficult conversations, by treating them as things happening in an adjacent room. The doorbell brought performance mode back into the house. Daniel's fiancée arrived first. She was warm and direct, with the kind of face that puts people at ease immediately. She shook my hand and asked what I did in the city. For one clear second, the answer sat right there on the edge of my tongue. My mother materialized at my shoulder before I could use it. Her fingers touched my arm just firmly enough to mean something. "Claire does administrative work for a small office downtown," she said smoothly. "Nothing too demanding. Now, let me see that ring." She steered the conversation away before it could settle on me. Daniel's fiancée looked back once, briefly, with the expression of someone who had noticed a seam in what they were being shown. The second doorbell brought the judge and his wife. He was taller than his courtroom presence suggested. Silver-haired, deliberate in his movements, with the particular kind of stillness that comes from spending decades in rooms where what you say next carries real weight. His wife was composed in a way that suggested she had spent her adult life being underestimated and had stopped finding it interesting. My mother launched into the performance she had been rehearsing since the invitation was sent. The handshakes. The compliments on the house. The presentation of my brother as the centerpiece of the evening. Then she turned toward me with the introduction she had prepared. "And this is our daughter Claire. She works in an office in the city, keeps herself busy, nothing too intense." The judge shook my hand, his grip was firm. His eyes found my face and stayed there one full second longer than the introduction required. "Ashworth," he said slowly. "Claire Ashworth." I saw it happen. The moment of fact in front of him did not match the file in his memory. The slight tightening at the brow. The quality of attention shifting. My mother laughed too quickly and directed him toward the table, but as he moved away, he looked back at me once. Not with vague recognition. With the look of someone cross-referencing something specific. Dinner began with my mother in complete command of the room. She refilled glasses, passed bread, and narrated my brother's professional history in a version so embellished it had almost no contact with the reality of what he actually did for work, and every time a question drifted in my direction, she redirected it. I was asked to get more ice. To check on the rolls. To see if the coffee was ready. Small, reasonable tasks that each moved me half a step further from the center of the table. The judge watched all of it. His wife watched with even more attention. Then he tapped his glass. The clean sound cut through my mother's narration and brought every head up. He stood and spoke about character. About what it means to truly know someone before agreeing to share a life with them. He spoke first to Daniel's fiancée, telling her she had always been gifted at seeing people clearly. Then to my brother. Then he began to walk slowly around the table, the habit of someone accustomed to addressing a room, and when he reached my corner, he stopped. He turned to face me fully. He let the silence extend just long enough for every eye at that table to follow his. "I have to say," he repeated, "I am surprised to find you here." My mother jumped in. "Claire is very private," But she is absolutely delighted for her brother. He did not look at her. Who are you to them, exactly? The room waited. I thought about saying what she had asked me to say. Office work. Nothing too intense. Instead, I heard myself answer with the only version of the sentence that was actually true. I am their daughter and Daniel's sister. And I am an investigative journalist for the Chicago Tribune. The silence that followed had a different weight than ordinary silence. Dense. Loaded. The kind that precedes something changing. My mother let out a short, dismissive laugh. Claire does some writing, but really it is just office work. She exaggerates. The judge turned toward her for the first time since he had stopped walking. Mrs. Ashworth, he said. His voice entirely level. Claire's series on the Northside police misconduct cases was cited in 3 separate legal briefs filed in my courtroom. Her reporting contributed directly to the outcome of that case. I quoted her work in remarks at a judicial conference last spring. The table went completely still. Daniel's fiancée turned toward my brother slowly. You told me your sister did office work, she said. He swallowed. Mom preferred it that way, he said. It came out very small. What happened next moved faster than I had expected things to move. The judge's wife set her fork down with a deliberate, quiet click. I am curious, she said to my mother, in the measured tone of someone who has decided that directness is the only charitable option, why you would ask your daughter to conceal her professional accomplishments from dinner guests. My mother reached for the explanation she always reached for. She said I was private. She said I did not like attention. She said the evening was meant to focus on Daniel and she had not wanted to create an imbalance. An imbalance, the judge's wife repeated. There is no polite version of what you are describing, she said. You asked your daughter to make herself smaller so your son could appear larger. That is not a family protecting one of its children. That is a family managing an inconvenient truth. My mother's eyes filled. Not immediately, there was a visible moment of calculation before the tears arrived. I have always done what I thought was best for both of my children, she said. Daniel's fiancée had gone very still. She turned fully toward my brother. Did you know? She asked. Did you know what your mother told my parents about your sister? He did not answer right away, which was its own kind of answer. Mom handles things a certain way, he said finally. I did not agree with all of it. But I did not. You did not say anything, she said. He looked at the table. Ryan. Her voice was quiet now, which made it carry more weight than if she had raised it. I need to know whether you are someone who lets his mother erase his sister and calls it keeping the peace. Because I cannot build a life with someone who operates that way. The judge placed a card on the table beside my plate. If you were ever looking for a reference for a fellowship or a panel, he said to me, you have my number. In that moment, the person my mother had spent years trying to hide was the only one the most important guest wanted to speak to. Daniel's fiancée reached for the ring on her finger. She removed it carefully. She set it on the table in front of my brother with a sound so small it should not have been audible. But everyone heard it. I am not ending this tonight, she said. But I am not continuing it as it is. Not until something changes. She stood. She picked up her bag. She looked at me before she left. Thank you, she said, for answering his question honestly. My mother's wail followed her to the door. My father sat with both hands flat on the table, looking at something in the middle distance that was not actually in the room. I stood, picked up my jacket, and looked at my mother. I love you, I said. But this is the last evening I will sit at your table under false terms. If you want me present in your life, it will be as I actually am, not as the version you find convenient to explain. She looked at me the way people look when they realize the story they have been managing has finally outgrown their ability to contain it. My father said, very quietly, she is right, Linda. I walked out. The drive back to the city that night was unlike any drive I had made after a family visit before, not the numb, headache quiet of someone who had smiled for hours and swallowed everything. Something different. Cleaner. The particular silence after a structure has been condemned and you can finally feel the air moving where the walls used to be. My phone had 12 messages by morning. My mother. My brother. A number I did not recognize. The unknown number was from Daniel's fiancée. She said she was sorry. She said she had not known. She asked if we could meet for coffee when she was next in the city. She wanted, she said, to hear my side of the story without anyone editing it while she listened. 3 months later, my mother called on a Tuesday afternoon. She said she did not know how to begin. She said my father had told her to try starting with the truth. Then she said she was sorry for asking me to hide. That she did not understand my world, but that she should have asked me to explain it instead of pretending it reflected badly on her. It was not the apology I had spent years imagining. It was smaller than that, and real in a way that the imagined version never would have been. I told her I was willing to try a new way. A few weeks later, I drove back for a Saturday afternoon visit with no occasion attached to it. When I walked through the door, the first thing I noticed was the mantel. My photograph was no longer behind the ivy, it was front and center. Slightly crooked, like my mother had moved it quickly, before she could change her mind, but there. Visible from anywhere in the room, I stood and looked at it for a long time. That evening over dinner, she asked me how a story goes from an idea to a front page. I told her it started with following something until it opened, and she listened, without changing the subject. Without redirecting to my brother. Without treating my answer like a hobby she was humoring. For the first time, she listened like someone who had decided my life was worth understanding. Here is what I want you to carry from this. If you have ever sat at a table where the price of belonging was making yourself smaller, that is not love. That is management. If someone needs you to lie about who you are so they can feel comfortable, they are not protecting you. They are protecting the story they tell about themselves. And the moment you stop agreeing to shrink, the moment you simply tell the truth about who you are and what you have built, you will find out very quickly who at that table was actually there for you, and who was only there for the version of you they could control. The first person who needs to know you are done making yourself small is you.